Hey, welcome back to our podcast, Project Brightside, where we always look on the bright side, even when things are looking pretty dark.
I'm Dr. Shelby.
And I'm Richard Brito, and we're your hosts for today's episode.
Topics of discussion for our podcast include society and culture, education, and TV and film.
Each episode of Season 2 will have an interview of a guest speaker, followed by a Bright Talk segment where we discuss a complicated topic in hopes of shining light on it.
For today's episode, we'll be interviewing Joe Reosti, founder and attorney of the law office of Joseph O. Reosti. Welcome to our show, Joe Reosti. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you.
So, our first question is just to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your interests professionally or personally.
Okay, I'll just give a brief bio, I guess.
Yeah.
I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. I don't like to tell a lot of people about my military background, but I enlisted straight out of high school in the United States Marines, and I went to Parris Island. And later on, I was sent to 29 Palms in California, where I was picked up for the Naval Academy Preparatory School. And so I ended up graduating from the Naval Academy in 1992. And then I guess after that, I chose Navy Air, and that's how I ended up in Pensacola, Florida. So I ended up not physically qualified due to sinus problems to fly in aircraft to fly in with the Navy. So I ended up as a supply officer on a nuclear submarine, the USS Batfish, where I
Wow.
can three major deployments. One through the Panama Canal, one up in the Arctic Circle, and then one basically around the world. We decommissioned the Batfish, and I got out of the Navy in 1999. I was married, and we tried to figure out what I was going to do. And the study of law always intrigued me, so I entered law school. I graduated in FSU in 1999, and I worked at first with my father-in-law at the time, who was a partner with a major law firm in Pensacola, Fred Levin. So I basically trained with the best. He practiced personal injury, but after my wife and I divorced, I switched over to criminal law. And at first, I began with the public defender's office, and you get a lot of experience with the public defender's office, a lot of cases. I did everything from ordinance violations and traffic tickets to misdemeanors, DUIs. I did Baker Acts for a year. That's mental health cases.
Yeah.
On to lesser felonies, and then major felonies like murder, attempted murder, drug trafficking, and some sex crimes. I eventually moved to private practice in 2018, and I've been in private practice ever since. Mainly, my firm mainly focuses on criminal law, but I have a general practice where I do some family law, immigration, some contracts. So that's me in a nutshell, I
That's
guess.
awesome. I also use that catchphrase, or that descriptor, which is kind of funny. But just to also plug in what the law firm is called, it's the Law Office of Joseph O. Reosti. We mentioned it prior. So with that, with your role right now, I do want to ask you, what kind of day-to-day obstacles have you faced, and how have you overcome them? And these could be non-specific, but
Sure. I'm in private practice right now, and just a sole practitioner.
mhm.
So if anybody has had to run their own business, the first thing that comes to mind is caseload. I have a number of cases on the books right now. Everybody's case is the most important case to them, and I try to understand that every time I make contact with the client. Managing my caseload and finding time to touch each file regularly and keep in contact with my clients is probably a big obstacle. I wouldn't call it an obstacle, but it's a major task for me to try to keep up with my clients. Client communication, I think, is the key to operating a successful law practice. I like to define my success as a lawyer by the level of client satisfaction that I have instead of the amount of money that I'm earning.
Yeah, and for every challenge, you want to overcome it. And I definitely see that as your core values and personality type.
No, I think that's That's great. I'm sure that your clients appreciate that as well. So the next question for you is what drives you? And this can be professional or personal.
Well, I guess I'll stay professional to start off with. So Luke Reosti is on the staff there at Brightside. He's my middle son. And one time he asked me to come to school to speak to the class about what I did. It was like bring your father to work day.
Oh,
And naturally, all the kids in middle school asked me, how can you defend criminals? And I mean, it's a tough question, but my clients, they're people too, you know, and many just made a big mistake or got caught up with the wrong crowd or were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, I try to remember that my clients are people that are in a bad time in their lives and they need help. What drives me professionally is I guess it's very satisfying when I close a case and I've helped a client through a very tough time in their lives. It's not always winning, like winning a jury trial in criminal law and a lot of times in family law also. It's achieving the best result possible given the facts. I could give hundreds of examples, I guess, but just recently I had a client who pled out to 11 months and 29 days in the Escambia County Jail, which would to most people be the absolute worst day of their lives. But this person was facing many years in prison originally. I was able to negotiate the case down to 11 months and 29 days. And my client was in tears when the case was called. So that client can get out soon and be reunited with their family. That's a glimpse at the most satisfying portion of criminal law. It's a difficult field. Those moments are what drive me.
Yeah, and I mean that's very honorable because, you mentioned, people being at the wrong time, wrong place, or just generational trauma and generational poverty, what it drives people to do. Logic might not always be applied in the circumstances. It's emotionally driven, or it's just wrong time, wrong place, or
and
it's
also,
depending.
like you said, even for those people who they weren't necessarily in the wrong place at the wrong time and maybe they did or didn't do the crime that they're being charged with. Like you said, they're people too, and
Mm.
we all deserve to be defended. And the fact is, if they're not able to prove that someone did something, then it's not really fair. It's a challenging job, of course, like you were reflecting on, but it's also a really important one. So I thank you for that. And thank you for your service as well. You're definitely a man of many hats.
What's awesome is that I also see the intersection with medicine and law because, you have to, in medicine, you have to be neutral. Same thing with, law. You have to maintain that neutrality and professionalism. So great
Yeah.
work. So I do want to ask next, what are a few of your biggest priorities for 2025?
I'm always looking to grow my practice and to grow professionally. So I try to continually to reinvest in my practice and to grow and improve as a counselor and a litigator, as an attorney, all of the facets of being an attorney, and hopefully my practice grows along with that. So as I mentioned before, I try to measure my success by client satisfaction rather than earning money. But you can't escape the financial aspects of running a business. So I hope my priorities for 2025 are continue to grow, have the firm grow, and so I can be able to help more people and take on a bigger caseload and not slight any client for time or quality.
Yeah, time management is very important, and aspiring to grow is very, very important because the moment you decide you want to stop growing, you stop elevating, you stop progressing, you stay stagnant. So I'm proud of you. Thank you for sharing that.
We kind of talked about the this year. What do you aspire to accomplish within the next 5 years?
Well, it's hard to look past the next week.
Fair enough.
when you have a very busy schedule. But
Mhm.
I do take a look down the road, and I'd like to get a better office space. I think in West Pensacola, that's where my client base lives. So I don't want to be away from them. So I'd like to find a better office space there in West Pensacola. Eventually, I'd like to expand my staff, and that will help me and assist me in managing my caseload, like we've been talking about, just so that I can help more people uh, and be a better attorney.
Beautiful outlook. I love it. So, what advice would you offer to those who wish to pursue a career like yours?
I always joke, and this is a nod to the doctors, I guess. I always joke that lawyering is not brain surgery, but it is. Law school is difficult. It's expensive. The course material can be difficult, and there's a lot of memorization. But every mountain seems daunting until you take those first steps towards climbing it. So I was a little reticent and had some anxiety about switching my profession from the Navy to being an attorney. Once I got into law school, I realized that if I keep plugging at it, I can graduate and pass the bar. Law school is much easier. One other thing I would say to prospective lawyers there is that law school and the practice of law is a lot easier if it's a calling rather than a just a prospective job or a source of money. It's hard to imagine working with criminals is a calling, but if you've if you've been there in jail and helped some people at the worst time of their lives, it's very satisfying. So to me, it's a calling. And so if you feel that the practice of law is a calling, then you should pursue that and not be
Mhm.
worried about maybe the cost of law school or what people say how difficult it is, because it's doable.
Yeah, you definitely got to take things step at a time. It all appears as a mountain, but if you take it step by step, it's doable for sure.
Really valuable advice. And I think any take on for school, so whether it's like a PhD or law school or medical school or what have you, it is daunting and, it does invoke some anxiety. So I think it's really helpful to hear from somebody who's not only gone through law school, but changed careers, changed their practice type after law school. And so I think it's great to hear from people who have done that and that reassurance that, yes, you can do it if the drive is right and the reasons you're going into it are right.
Yeah. And especially how diverse you are. You not only focus on criminal law, but you also have a general practice where you have family law, you have estate planning, you have wills.
And I'm sure that the field of medicine, you have a calling there. The results are more tangible sometimes if you can help somebody through an illness or.
No, but you're right. I mean, they're both for both situations. A lot of times it's people who really need support from lawyers or from doctors or from psychologists. Shout out to no, no, I think you're exactly right in that it's it is a calling and it takes a special type of person. And I think if you're going into it, because you feel that it's your calling or because you love doing it and you think, that you could serve well in that role, then, even though school is challenging and all this stuff goes by, it's still so rewarding because you're not only doing something that you like or that you find rewarding, but you're also able to help people through that. So I think they're both similar in the sense that if you're going into it for money, that might be might be challenging just because school's so hard for both of them. But I think if it's something that you're interested in, then absolutely doable for medical school too.
Yeah, I agree.
Our last question for this part is what's one book, TV show, or podcast outside of ours that you think everyone should experience?
If you know anything about me as a person, I'm a huge Detroit Lions fan. So
Okay.
and they're a long suffering franchise, and it's I follow all Detroit sports. So any podcast or book or article that deals with the Lions is great for me. I guess I guess if I wanted to be professional, I would say that I should be doing continuing legal education. But if I put in as much CLE as I did in Lions articles, I'd probably be the best lawyer out there. Uh,
No, balance.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's important to invest in your passions as much as you invest in your work. So having a balance of both is good. So that's a wrap for the interview. So for our next segment, Bright Talk, where we discuss complicated topics in hopes of shining light on the matter, this week we'll be discussing drug addiction and mental health issues in criminal defense, rehabilitation, and reintegration into a productive society. So a call to action. So, with this in mind, let's start off with the questions for our Bright Talk topic. So, what are some barriers your clients may face when confronting a misdemeanor, felony, or other legal issue?
a large percentage of the cases, of the criminal cases that I deal with, have to do with drug addiction, and they have a drug addiction component and a mental health component. That complicates things and poses a huge problem on so many levels. For instance, most law enforcement officers have a lot of training in drug interdiction, and they have more training in drug interdiction than they do in mental health. But a lot of times it goes hand in hand. So there are a lot of times I've seen that law enforcement officers don't know what to do when they're face to face with an out of control individual that's suffering from serious mental illness. And that gets you into, and the doctor might expand on this, dual diagnosis issues, which pose a huge problem to prosecutors. So prosecutors in Florida are assistant state attorneys, and huge problems to the defenders also when we're trying to come up with workable solutions to the issue of being arrested and a lot of times it's caused by a breakdown of medicine or drug addiction. These issues pose huge problems when you're trying to devise solutions such as supervision and treatment versus incarceration and prison time, I guess. So along those lines, I did a year of Baker Acts when I was in the public defender's office, and I got a large amount of experience in that field over the course of the year. Obviously, I'm not a licensed doctor or medical professional. Now that I'm in criminal law, I've ended up helping many individuals with dual diagnosis issues and that are facing serious crimes like first degree felony fentanyl trafficking charges. Many in the field of mental health would attest to those with serious mental illness tend to self medicate themselves, and that's where we end up with a lot of this of the interaction with these individuals in the criminal realm. It's also not confined to just criminal law. Drug addiction and mental health cause huge problems in the family, and which cause a lot of legal issues in the family law area, such as dependency. That a dependency is in Florida is where the Department of Children and Families will shelter a child based upon, for instance, parents who are doing drugs in front of their children. And then there's eventually, sometimes there's termination of parental rights, loss of custody, divorce. These are major barriers, major issues with a large amount of my clients.
Yeah, and honestly, it also brings into perspective how much rehabilitation is needed too, because there's a lot of substance use disorders out there that go unnoticed. Addiction is a very prominent issue and can, have profound effects, negative effects on one's health, social systems, and even productivity and your health. And that all just cascades from there into this snowball effect of negativity. And if there's positive interventions that are implemented, like the mental health field and, family medicine and law and applying more rehabilitation into the system, I think that would be a great way to halt or pause the the incidence of violence and the incidence of mental health issues that are perpetuated through cycles. If we start, intervening in a positive way to challenge that negative, I think that's a great way, but it will take a collective action, multidisciplinary approach, all sorts of ways. efforts. That's my
Yeah.
take on it.
No, that was great. I mean, I think we also have a system that unfortunately often, kind of lets people fall through,
Hmm.
especially people who, may be of lower socioeconomic backgrounds or do suffer with mental illness and have challenges kind of setting up appointments for themselves at times. I think working on a systemic level to help better address that and like create spaces and methods for people to get better access to primary care and to psych services who are underinsured or uninsured would be pivotal in that as well.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's really challenging representing people because a lot of times, people are stuck going to the emergency room for problems when they're not able to, to have a primary care doctor or to have a psychiatrist or psychologist. And so I think they're doing the absolute best that they can and they're supporting them the best way they can, but they have limited resources for that. And sometimes you end up kind of with this list of diagnoses for people because no one's been able to have a longitudinal relationship with someone to figure out, what's going on and how we can actually help them. And so I'm sure you've helped them in that as well and needing to clarify kind of diagnoses for defending someone too. You probably helped them medically moving forward also.
Well,
Yeah, valid points.
I've seen that in firsthand in the court system, and a lot of times in criminal cases or in family law cases, they have the attorneys get my clients evaluated, and it's very difficult to come up with accurate diagnosis and treatment plans when there's so much time constraint and money constraints. The providers only get to see the clients for a short amount of time, and they have limited histories provided to them. And so the providers are doing the best they can, but a lot of times you get diagnoses such as schizoaffective disorder or a personality disorder, where it might not be as severe a mental disorder. So when the rubber meets the road down there, where these individuals are being arrested on the street because they can't get the treatment that they need, it poses a lot of problems, and I guess everybody who ends up seeing it for the first time always asks why aren't there more programs out there? Well, nobody kind of cares about it until they're burdened with it, and the need that's always prevalent and always there, but it never seems to get as much attention with the budget makers.
No, that's
Yeah.
important to mention, highlighting, systemic issues or issues that exist so that they could be attended to. And not just a band-aid. It's actually like focusing on curing it.
Yeah. Write your representatives, everyone.
Hmm.
For the next one, what kind of accommodations, if any, do you make for a client in regard to individual circumstance and ability? And I know we kind of, you know, touched on that a little bit, but for some specifics.
Yeah.
Well, as an attorney or anybody that's operating a business, you have to make accommodations for the clients as they are. So, accommodations come to mind. I often tailor my services to each of my clients' special needs. If they're physically handicapped, I might meet them at their home instead of requiring them to, load up in a car and drive to a meeting place. Sign language for the hearing impaired is as much a necessity as a translator would be to a client that doesn't speak English. So, like a Spanish speaking client, or I always try to accommodate my clients when it comes to their physical needs. Ultimately, it's of extreme importance at the end of the day in criminal law. Each of my clients understand their rights, their options, the full spectrum of risk that they're facing, what the hard reality of the facts are in their particular case. So it's important that for each client that's facing a charge, I have to make sure that they understand that on their level. So if I need to to make accommodations for them in order to achieve that, then any accommodations, I'll do that to make sure that they understand all of the things they need to understand to make informed choices.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Really connecting in that gap. It's important that you care about that because not a lot of people do in the profession. They just try to like pass it off or like you mentioned until they're burdened with it. But taking that extra step of, to have that stellar representation, I think that's phenomenal. It's very inclusive. The next question is, what are some of the biggest mistakes that clients make in the criminal defense field?
Well, you start with Miranda. Most people don't understand Miranda rights, and we could probably have a complete
Hmm.
podcast on that topic. But Miranda deals with custodial interrogation. So you have the right to remain silent. If you're detained and law enforcement starts asking you questions, you don't have to answer them. Some of the greatest mistakes I've had with clients is that they just don't avail themselves of their right to remain silent. If they had, then a good deal of the cases I had would have been dismissed or wouldn't exist.
Wow.
Also, along those lines, law enforcement officers routinely they ask direct questions when they're in what they like to call a citizen's make citizen contact with somebody. So they don't. So it's not like they're detaining somebody. They just walk up to them and they start asking them questions, like, "Hey, is it okay if I search you?" And it sounds a little silly, but there's a lot of people that say yes, go ahead, I don't mind. Is it all right if I search your car? And I just want to say, it's okay to tell them no. They're going to tell you if they have the authority to search you one way or the other, but you don't need to consent to searches either. So those are the two main mistakes that people make when they're being arrested.
Yeah, facts. Facts.
Facts.
Facts.
Yeah, I didn't,
Um,
it's definitely not legal advice, it's just facts.
I have a client that says that all the time. When I
really? That's funny. But those are important things, and I think people don't know when they're faced with someone in a position of authority, and the law and both and medicine as well are both, confusing at times. And so I think it's important that people hear that. Thank you for sharing that. The next one is, what are the biggest challenges for individuals who completed incarceration and then require having to integrate back into society?
Well, a lot of my clients are eventually incarcerated, and they're in jail for long periods of time. You can either let that defeat you, or you can let it be a great life lesson, and you can use the time that you have for education, for therapy. For instance, if the dual diagnosis problem, you can avail yourself of therapy while you're incarcerated. There's GED programs. There's vocational education where you can learn a trade. When you end up getting out, there really aren't a lot of, and you would think that there are, but there aren't a lot of halfway houses out there. A lot of people, when they get out or they're put on probation, they don't have a safety net at all. And when you're starting off at ground zero with absolutely nothing, that's where there's some real challenges. So, like here in Pensacola, there's programs that provide cell phones to the penniless. They provide bus tickets for transportation. What everybody needs to have if they're going on supervision is a steady job, a steady place to live, and communication and transportation. And a lot of people don't have that. So those are really the biggest challenges. Is just meeting the basic, sometimes meeting the basic needs when you first get out there. So you need to have a plan, and you need to prioritize. First, I need a place to stay. So, for instance, I could get a job. I could get a place at a shelter. Then I need a job. I can start to do day labor. there's a shelter here in Pensacola that's right by a day labor organization. And and then avail yourself of some of the programs that the state has, like get a free cell phone, get a bus pass, because you have to. A lot of times when you're in the criminal system, you have to meet up with probation officers all the time, and there's no excuses for that. If you don't meet with them, you end up violating. So you have to do it yourself. You have to go
Mm.
out and make sure that you
Self-reliant?
yes, self-reliant, maybe
Advocate for yourself too, and which can be
Yeah, there's
proactive.
just
You have to be
proactive.
active. Got it.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it's
uh,
very, very, very true.
as I mentioned, there's no excuses. When a probation officer wants to see you and you can't make it, you can't, and you say, well, it was too far, then they're going to say, well, there's the bus, you could have gotten up earlier. And the judge will say that when they're sentencing you to a violation of probation. So
Yeah, a lot of important facts that you're mentioning, with time management being important, especially if you have those deadlines that they could be not very forgiving. It's also important to highlight how people that do, finish their sentence and come out, uh, they might have, what you're mentioning is issues with accessibility. And with that, those issues with accessibility, it makes it even harder to break out of that cycle. For instance, like in Florida, homeless individuals, if, and then I'm going to fact check this after if I need to edit it out or if I need to talk to the lawyer right here, Joe. Um, but essentially, if you're homeless and you're out and about like for a while, you're sentenced, you go to jail, and that could be, the situation for a lot of people that have substance use disorder. And, once they're out from prison or jail, it's hard for them to not go back to that habit. If they don't have that support system, if they, the people that they know are associated with that, it's, much more likely for them to engage in that and then just pick up what they left off because, they might not have the skills of like time management. They might not have skills of like navigating, operating their schedule and making sure that they know how to, plan from getting to point A to point B or using the transportation system. That could be a whole other level. Understanding access of transportation, what's out there, what could be done for you. It's very difficult. And, there's like, for instance, some of the things that I've noticed, if you want to apply for a nonprofit, and you want to do a nonprofit, you you could do a nonprofit as long as you don't teach financial literacy. If financial literacy is one of your things, you're not going to get approved and get that 501(c)(3). So it's just, you got to look at the system and how it's built and what it perpetuates and, highlighting, to defend your clients the best of your ability and, advocate for them. And I think with medicine, with law, with social work, that there's that intersection of, defending people and advocating for people. So now, I do want to ask the final question, turning it around on, from the perspective of a lawyer, to other lawyers and other legal professionals. So, what is some advice that you would offer to policymakers, lawyers, and other professionals in the legal field?
well, I'll just end with a sentiment that I've already stated. You don't realize how little there are mental health programs uh, available out there. It's only recently that courts have offered drug court and mental health court as options in these tough cases for dual diagnosis cases that I was speaking about. So it's always as if the policymakers are behind the power curve uh, when it comes to the needs that are out there for a huge portion of their constituency. The percentage of people that are suffering from mental illness and percentage of people that are suffering from drug addiction and those where the drug addiction and the mental health issues overlap, that's a very large portion of larger than people realize until you work in that field, and then if you interface with it and you never been involved in it, you realize, why aren't there more programs for individuals with drug addiction, like inpatient programs where the fees are paid. There are a lot of programs that are out there for the wealthy, but not a lot of the people that are out. The real people that need it are don't have any money because their illness and drug addiction have left them penniless. So my advice to policymakers is not to ignore it, nor the problem, or to think that solve itself. I think I don't know. It's a problem that's always there, and there's always room for more programs that assist people with these issues.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's the point of this Bright Talk. Not I think, I know that this is the point of the Bright Talk, to have a call for action, to highlight issues that are out there, in many different fields, and, that intersect, like family law, family medicine, social work. There's an intersection depending on cases. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on our show, and this has been a really great conversation. So
I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I'll be happy to return if invited.
we'd
Yeah,
love to
yeah,
have you back.
definitely. I love that. There's so many things that we could talk about. So that's it for episode 5 of season 2 of Project Brightside. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting us. Make sure to recommend our podcast to your friends and family, and also make sure to keep sharing. So we have a lot more in the works for the rest of season 2. Until next time, take care.
And go Lions.
Go Commanders. Episode 5 of season 2 of Project Brightside was executive produced by Richard Brito, Luke Reosti, Shelby Flohr, John Skirpinich, Jake Reosti, Sofia Paez, Andres Gil Arana, and Zoe Rushetsky. Music by Jake Reosti. Edited by Luke Reosti and Richard Brito. And a special thanks to Joe Reosti.